To me, opera is the ultimate combination of music, drama, and sometimes dances. If you haven't tried it, please try. I am almost 71 years old. I have been a journalist for 50 of them, and I have held top executive positions in Swedish media for more than 30 years. And in most cases, I've been the first woman to hold these positions. So what do I have to contribute to today's young generation, to you who are sitting here? I, who in the 1950s was the first one in my family to take an A-level and then study at university. Possibly the very fact that I am old and I do have a lot of experience, both in professional and private life. In some way, conditions for work and living for creative people like you and me hasn't changed that much from generation to generation. But after having been for more than 30 years in these top positions, I can promise you one thing. It's lonely up there on the top. Not always, but often. But there are ways to deal with that loneliness. But if it is so lonely, why have I continued up there? Why have I repeatedly accepted that sort of positions? There are several reasons. One reason is a kind of desire many of us in the 1940s generation had to be part of building that new society at that time. I was as such a builder, and I wanted to be kind of educator, I think. As a builder, I was first a political reporter, reporting and scrutinizing politics and politicians. And I think I regarded myself very much as an educator. And this seems perhaps a bit too serious or too solemn to you who are part of a very individualistic generation where career, salaries, and bonus plays a big role. I'll tell you one thing. I'm sometimes longing for that at least some of you would feel the same desire as I had to be part of building your future society and at the same time be a bit of an educator. Another reason for me to keep on to top positions was a desire to have the possibility to lead the media development in an area where society was going through and is going through a real profound change. To have the power to develop papers, radio, and television and make them important, interesting, relevant for citizens of all kinds. It is okay, I would say, to like to have power, but with one condition. You must accept that with power always comes responsibility. Responsibility for human beings, for being ethical and truthful to your work. As a female manager on the top, I have often been called the Iron Lady, a female major, and recently also likened to Machiavelli's The Prince. I do not recognize myself in any of these epithets, And I'm almost convinced that no man in similar positions would be called the Iron Man. Have you heard about it? Or Major, or Machiavelli's The Prince. And against that background, I have recently, as you heard, written my memoirs, my self-biography, because I wanted to give my story about my job, my leadership, my thoughts and decisions on women, children, and even men, and not just leave to others to give their descriptions of me. And I must say, I'm pretty happy with having written that book. There has been an extremely exciting media development over the decades I have been active as a journalist and a manager. When I started my journalistic career, there was only one television channel. Everybody watched the same programs. There were only 2 radio stations, but many daily papers. Internet was not of the map, of course. When I retired from my position as CEO at the Swedish television, there were 200, we said, and that was 4 years ago, 220 TV channels to be watched in Sweden. There were numerous of radio stations, but remarkably fewer newspapers. And the internet had become one of the most important parts, I would say, of our life. Internet that people use for watching TV, listening to radio, reading newspapers, communicating via email and blogs, to acquire one or more partners, have sex, shop goods and services. You know much better this than I do. And I myself have had the advantage of working with and leading a lot of these changes in papers, in public service, radio, and TV. And my chairman at the Swedish television said in a speech when I quit my job there that he really didn't know if it was me, Christina, who had led the development or if development had to comply with me. He leaned, he said, to his first theory, because over the years I have had much of the media development in Sweden in my hands, he said. Of course, it's a truth with many modifications. But what is true is that in all my managerial positions, I have initiated and implemented major and important change projects. Partly because I'm a creative person who wants to be part of the social fabric and a bit of an educator, as I said earlier. And partly because I like to lead other people and, frankly, like to have the power to do this. But honestly, I will admit that it took me a long time to figure out how to lead people and therefore my employees. In the early years, I was mostly a good girl and thought it was me and my closest management team that would pursue the change project. You might hear what I did wrong, because many of you have already had some kind of leadership, been educated in one way or another concerning leadership. I did not, until too late, involve in the projects my staff members, in those who should later do the job, which meant that they were often opposed to me and were very critical to me as a boss, not leader, but boss. A few examples of the progress I initiated and implemented was the complete change of traditional mornings in Swedish radio to morning news shows with commentaries and debates and so on. And a total makeover of the daily Dagens Nyheter, both concerning design and content. And at the age of 61, 10 years ago, I got the assignment of leading the public service Swedish television as CEO. And that was in the era for high technology transformation. And at that time, there was really the internet. The company had to move from analog to digital technology. A modern website was to be built with the possibility to watch programs when and where the audience wanted them. That's what today is called SVT Play. And new channels were launched, the children's channel and the educational channel. Again, none of these change projects were carried out without protests. At the Swedish television, protests came from a great part of the staff because they had to learn new ways of doing their job. We closed quite a few of the studios out in Sweden. And for the first time, we also have to sack employees. Besides that, there were protests from politicians, but not much from the audience, because they got more and more to watch. And I and my management, we were convinced that these changes were necessary if Swedish television would continue to be competitive, interesting, and important to Swedes. But among these, in the end at least, successful projects, I had my failures. The biggest one is this, when I tried to bring order to the, at that time, major tabloid in Sweden, Expressen, which had poor content and the circulation, losing circulation. We decided to make a quality tabloid. We called it Qualoid. But we couldn't, my management team, convince the very core of the employees that this was the right way to go. They did not believe in the project, and I hadn't strength enough to proceed at that time. I have never worked as hard as I did during that period. But in the end, my body and my mind collapsed, and I resigned after only 1.5 years. At Dagens Nyheter, I was for 14 years. That was my real professional failure, even if it took quite a long time before I could use the word failure, before I could put it into my mouth. But a little less than a year later, I was appointed visiting professor at the University of Gothenburg, which gave me at least part of my self-confidence back. And remember, you learn a lot from having your failures, so don't be afraid of them. I have always had male models concerning how to manage as a leader, especially during my first 10-15 years as a top manager. Not because I wanted it, but when I was appointed editor-in-chief and even CEO, there were no female top managers in the media world, and there were no leader training programs in my world either. It was always men who hired me as a manager. A management team consisted of me and men. But some lessons, anyhow, were good to get from these gentlemen, like that you always have to come well prepared to meetings where you want to pursue and push through your project ideas. Further, you should gain support, from at least one or two of the others in the management team before the meeting to be successful and get the right decision. And perhaps most important, I learned eventually that I should not interrupt someone else just because I came at a good argument during the meeting. I should wait my turn. This, I myself and other women still find difficult to remember. It took me many years. I was, I think, in the 50s before I gave myself really time to go into myself and dare to feel for what kind of manager I really wanted to be. And the result of this was I wanted to be open-minded, reflective, work with delegation, which means have trust in your employees and their abilities. You could call it a kind of change management or change manager. One thing I was always careful about, I, as a female executive manager, wanted to have a fairly equal number of male and female managers in the different departments at the Dagens Nyheter and Swedish television. But one day at the Dagens Nyheter, I discovered that a number of female managers had quit and been replaced by men. When I asked these women why they stopped, they told me two things. I know too little about leadership, and I do not get adequate support from above, from you, they said. This made me start a year-long training program in leadership for women journalists only, no men. But after that year, all of them held executive positions at the paper. So how about children, men, and private life, family, which Emma was talking about? Has it been possible to combine with a professional life like mine? I have 2 daughters and I have 2 stepsons. But it was far from obvious that I was going to have my children. When I got my first job as a political reporter on the radio and I was around 25, I definitely hesitated. Work and friends became my life for many years. But then I met a man who already had 2 children, and now was awakened my desire to have children of my own and be involved in raising children of a new generation. But that man was not interested in more children. So I broke up and I decided that all by myself adopt a child from Thailand instead of trying to find a new man. Well, the former man, we got together again, and I gave birth to a second daughter, and was, by the way, on leave of absence during 6 months. And I was at that time editor-in-chief for the radio news it worked very well. And the man in question is since long ago father to my 2 daughters. That has been my way of, if you call it, reshaping the family. But of course, it is not a bed of roses to combine family and top jobs as a woman. One important condition is, in my view, that you have to find, at least for a while, a man who is on equal footing, who is willing to share responsibility for children and home. And without such a man, it wouldn't at least have worked for me, even if it does for many others. But I'll tell you one thing, and I have it in my book. When I was editor-in-chief, and one of my daughters was a teenager, she wrote a letter, which I found when I wrote my memoirs, and there she wrote, "It is as if I have no mother." It was tough to find, and I felt guilty. But today, I'm lucky she doesn't remember that she wrote that letter and felt so abandoned at that time. And nowadays, my relation with my daughters and even grandchildren is a warm one. But it is a dilemma. It is a dilemma to love both family life and your profession. But it is a dilemma you can cope with. So please do it. And don't forget to be part of building your future society. A wish from a woman having had many top positions born in the 1940s. Thank you.